Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our goal is always to take what look like, completely separate sources, articles on philosophy, psychology, even high-stakes legal strategy, and find the hidden wires connecting them all.
Exactly.
And today, we're on a mission to understand the invisible forces that really govern how we act. We're talking about hidden desires, the mechanics of empathy, and what really turns simple rivalry into, outright conflict.
It's a really fascinating synthesis. The sources we're looking at, they really push you to look beyond the surface level of what people say they want or how they seem to behave.
Right.
And instead, you're forced to focus on the underlying intentions, the motivations. We're connecting these ancient ideas about imitation with, modern neuroscience.
So as we walk through all this, we want you to keep one core question in mind.
Really important.
How well do you really know what you want? And maybe more importantly, how well do you understand what's truly motivating the person sitting across the table from you?
Because as we'll see, what motivates us often isn't some pure internal need. It's something much more complicated.
Let's start with this revolutionary idea about rivalry. It comes from the philosopher René Girard, and he called it mimetic desire.
Right.
And this concept, it just fundamentally changes how you view human motivation. Girard says we don't really desire things based on inherent need, like needing water when you're thirsty.
No, that's biological. That's a need. Desire is different.
Our desires are, in a way, borrowed. We imitate each other's desires. And that shared imitation is a direct pipeline to conflict, especially when two people are suddenly chasing the same thing.
That's the crucial distinction. Biological needs are about survival. Desire, for Girard, is always mediated by a model. We look to someone else, a role model, a rival, an influencer, to tell us what's worth wanting.
And we're built for this.
Oh, completely. Our neural structure, things like mirror neurons, it makes us incredible imitators. But Girard makes a key distinction between, let's say, positive imitation, which is just how we learn things.
Like learning an instrument.
Exactly. And what he calls mimesis, which is imitation that's infused with the negative energy of potential rivalry.
Okay, so imitation is learning to play guitar by watching a tutorial. Mimesis is getting obsessed with beating that one person who won the guitar competition you were also in.
Precisely. It's the rivalry that defines it. And the danger of that rivalry really depends on the distance between the person who's desiring and the person they're copying.
Girard splits this into two categories. Let's start with the less volatile one, external mediation.
External mediation is when your model is, they're far away. They're not a real competitor. Think of a young student who looks up to a famous CEO.
Right, they want to be like them someday.
But that CEO's life is totally distant. It's unreachable for now. The CEO doesn't feel threatened by the student. The rivalry it's abstract. It barely exists.
But then the whole dynamic flips when you enter the world of internal mediation. And this is where, you said, the sparks fly.
This is where conflict becomes almost inevitable. Because in internal mediation, the model and the subject, they're peers. They look like each other. They operate in the same world. And they're competing for the exact same object.
A
Promotion, academic prize, romantic partner. They become rivals. And their hatred for each other gets so intense because, ironically, they see a mirror image of themselves in the person they're fighting.
It sounds exhausting, but also incredibly relatable. It's that dynamic where you suddenly want something only because someone else wanted it first. That's the definition of covetousness.
And our sources have this very blunt Spanish colloquialism for it, culo veo, culo quiero.
Which translates to, what, roughly?
Roughly. See ass, want ass. It just perfectly captures that impulsive, almost non-logical drive to get something simply because you saw a rival claim it.
And this kind of raw desire, it doesn't come for free, does it?
Yeah.
There's a penalty. The sources call it the wanting it tax.
Yes. And this tax shows up the second you enter a negotiation. There's this great anecdote about an antique clock buyer who he loved the clock too much.
And he showed it.
He went in, gushing about the clock's history, its beauty, and in doing so, he gave up all his leverage. The seller immediately saw his desperation and just held firm on the price.
That is a perfect example. You get penalized financially for your own emotional transparency. If mimetic desire fuels conflict, then showing that desire in a negotiation is like waving a flag that says, I will pay anything to win.
It empowers the other person entirely. The less you signal that you desperately need that thing, the more control you have.
Okay, so if mimetic desire creates these small-scale conflicts, these rivalries, what happens when it scales up? When it threatens an entire community? How do societies deal with that Hobbesian war of all against all.
This is where we get to what Girard called the scapegoat mechanism. It's the tool that ancient communities almost accidentally developed to solve this overwhelming internal strife.
So when all that tension and violence reaches a breaking point, a crisis where everyone is fighting everyone else, the community needs an outlet.
That's the key move. The community unites by targeting a single person, the scapegoat. And that person gets blamed for everything: famine, the plague, the violence itself.
And once that victim is punished or kicked out
or killed, peace returns. And crucially, that sudden return to order is seen by everyone as absolute, undeniable proof that the scapegoat was guilty all along.
And Girard's point about the Bible is that it's one of the first texts to actually expose this. Most myths tell the story from the perspective of the scapegoaters.
Right, justifying the violence.
But the biblical narrative often tells it from the perspective of the innocent victim. It pulls back the curtain on this whole arbitrary process.
So, if ancient societies solved conflict by assigning total blame to one person, how does a modern system like the legal system handle this? How does it formalize assigning fault and, more importantly, intent?
That's the perfect bridge. Because now we can transition to a very modern arena: high-stakes family law. Specifically, child custody cases, where every single behavior is scrutinized for intent.
And the courts aren't just looking at what you do, they're informing why you did it. And the only thing that matters is the best interests of the child.
The court is essentially trying to figure out if your motivation is cooperative and child-focused, or if it's selfish and just aimed at punishing your ex.
Which is why showing negative intent is basically self-sabotage in court.
For example, the sources point out that starting fights, yelling at your former spouse, sending angry texts, even if you feel completely justified, it's so damaging. It creates the appearance of bullying, and a court has to take that record seriously.
Another huge mistake is anything that looks like alienation of affection. If you're constantly blocking the child from talking to the other parent, or you're obstructing visits, the court reads that as a deliberate attempt to poison the relationship.
That's directly against the child's best interest. And with property damage, it's seen as just overt aggression.
Which is why the modern system demands objective proof of good intent. You have to create a paper trail. The sources are so clear on this. Keep meticulous records, emails, texts, and especially child support payments.
That documentation is your shield. It's the critical evidence against any false claims that might be made in the email.
Okay, so let's move from how the law assesses intent to how we as humans read intentions in the first place. This brings us to our psychological toolkit: theory of mind and empathy.
Right. Let's start with theory of mind, or Tom. It sounds really academic, but it's basically a superpower we all develop.
It is. Theory of mind is simply the ability to attribute thoughts, desires, and intentions to other people. To understand that they have a mental state that is separate from yours and separate from reality.
So it's an inference. We're creating a theory about what's going on in someone else's head.
Exactly, because we don't have direct access. And Tom is what lets you predict and explain their behavior, and it develops in stages.
You can actually watch it happen in a child's development.
That's right. First, kids recognize diverse desires. I want this, you want that. Then, diverse beliefs. I think the key is here, you think it's there. Then, they grasp that people have access to different knowledge.
And the final, most critical step:
understanding false beliefs. Understanding that someone can hold a mistaken idea about reality.
The classic test for this, the Sally Ann test.
Yes. The child has to understand that Sally, who put her marble in a basket and left, will look for it in the basket when she comes back, even though Anne secretly moved it to a box while she was gone.
So the child has to infer Sally's incorrect mental state, not just state the fact of where the marble actually is.
And very closely related to this is empathy, which is, the ability to perceive another's perspective and understand and maybe even share their experience.
And we can break this down into two main types. The first is effective empathy, the emotional part.
Correct. Effective empathy is when you respond with an appropriate emotion. It can be simple emotional contagion, like when you just absorb the mood of a room, or it can be empathic concern, which is feeling sympathy.
It can also be negative.
It can. It can also manifest as personal distress, that feeling of anxiety you get when you see someone else suffering.
And then there's it's the colder, more clinical twin, cognitive empathy.
Right. Cognitive empathy is purely the ability to understand another person's mental state. Perspective taking without necessarily sharing the emotion. And a critical subtype here is tactical or strategic empathy.
which is using that understanding not for connection, but to get a desired outcome.
To anticipate and manipulate, essentially. And here's where it gets really interesting. When it comes to actually helping someone, research shows cognitive empathy is often a better predictor of action than emotional empathy.
How so?
Well, if you feel too much personal distress, too much effective empathy, you might just avoid the situation because you're overwhelmed. The ability to intellectually understand the need without drowning in the feeling is what leads to practical help.
This brings up some really interesting nuances about who has these tools. There's new research on something called a double empathy problem.
Right. Historically, any social difficulty between a non-autistic and an autistic person was framed as a deficit on the part of the autistic person.
But this idea turns that on its head.
It does. It suggests the difficulty might be mutual. A breakdown in understanding between two different neurotypes rather than a one-sided deficiency. It's like a cross-cultural misunderstanding, not a lack of ability.
And what about the other end of the spectrum? What about individuals with psychopathy? The assumption is that they just lack theory of mind entirely.
But the research is surprising. Studies using things like the reading the mind in the eyes test show that psychopathic individuals often perform just as well as non-psychopathic adults.
So they can correctly identify the emotion from the subtle cues.
Yes. The capacity to intellectually know what others are thinking or feeling, the theory of mind, seems to be intact. The gap isn't in the knowing, it's in the effective response.
It's in the caring.
Exactly. The cognitive tool is there. It's the perfect setup for strategic empathy. But the emotional response that would normally stop you from hurting someone is often missing.
That distinction is huge. So let's pivot from understanding other people's minds to the incredible force of shaping your own. The last thread here is about this relentless confidence that seems to drive super high achievement, what people now call manifestation.
And this connects right back to the power of your internal mental state. High achievers across so many fields, they often credit their success to this unwavering, almost religious belief that their success wasn't just possible, it was inevitable.
They essentially impose their will onto reality. You see it in these iconic stories like Jim Carrey famously writing himself a check for $20 million for acting services rendered years before he made that kind of money.
It was an internal contract with a future reality. Or you look at the musician Ice Spice. She talked about walking around New York, just constantly visualizing her face on huge billboards. She said, "It was a lie, but I told myself it was true until it became true."
She hacked her own motivation. Bruce Lee was even more precise. He wrote down a specific goal to achieve world fame and have $10 million by 1980. He set a deadline and a number. It wasn't just hope. It was a blueprint backed by absolute certainty.
What's consistent here, and what the sources really emphasize, is that this level of belief isn't tied to being a good person. You look at incredibly dominant but controversial athletes, Mike Tyson, Conor McGregor, John Jones.
Right.
Their dominance is often attributed to this deep, relentless self-belief combined with insane preparation. The psychological commitment to being the best just superseded everything else.
It's the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy. And it shows the immense power of our internal state.
So we've really covered the full scope today. We started with how invisible, borrowed desires create conflict through mimetic theory. Then we looked at the mental tools theory of mind, empathy we use to navigate all that. And finally, we saw how that focused internal belief drives achievement.
But here's a sobering counterpoint to all the success stories. Even when people do get what they wanted, the research shows we are generally terrible at predicting what will actually make us happy.
Right.
The satisfaction is fleeting.
Which is why psychodynamic approaches tell you to look deeper at the unconscious things that shape our emotions. To manage the anxiety from all this conflict, our ego uses defenses. And the most fundamental defense is repression.
Repression is like your brain's automatic filing cabinet for anything you really don't want to deal with. Painful memories, upsetting thoughts. It just moves them out of your conscious awareness.
It gives you temporary peace, but it doesn't solve the problem. And that leads us to our final provocative thought. It comes from studies of people who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge.
It's a very powerful, very difficult anecdote.
It is. But in almost every single reported case, the survivors said the same thing. About 2/3 of the way down, in that horrible fall, they had a moment of absolute clarity.
And in that moment,
They realized that every single problem that drove them to jump was fixable. The only thing that wasn't fixable was the fall itself. Their external reality hadn't changed, but their internal perspective on it had radically, instantly shifted.
so if that kind of radical change requires such an intense reframing, we'll leave you with this question. What non-physical crisis are you facing right now that you might realize, in retrospect, was entirely fixable the moment you chose to reframe it? Think about that immense power of internal reality until the next deep dive.